bedtime story relating to the sign of Aries. The Emperor's New Clothes by Hans Christian Andersen. Many years ago there was an emperor so exceedingly fond of new clothes that he spent all his money on being well dressed. He cared nothing for reviewing his soldiers, going to the theatre or going for a ride in his carriage, except to show off his new clothes. He had a coat for every hour of every day, and instead of saying as one might about any other ruler, "The king's in council," here they always said, "The emperor's in his dressing room." In the great city where he lived, there were many people, and every day many strangers came into town. Among them one day came two swindlers. They let it be known that they were weavers, and they said they could weave the most magnificent fabrics imaginable. Not only were their colours and patterns uncommonly fine, but clothes made out of this cloth had a wonderful way of becoming invisible to anyone who was unfit for his office or who was unusually stupid. "They'd be just the clothes for me," thought the emperor. "If I wore them, I'd be able to discover which men in my empire were unfit for their posts, and I could tell the wise men from the fools. Yes, I certainly must get some of this cloth woven for me right away." He paid the two swindlers a large sum of money to start at once. They set up two looms and pretended to weave. Though there was nothing on the looms, all the finest silk and the purest thread which they demanded went into their travelling bags while they worked the empty looms far into the night. "I'd like to know how those weavers are getting on with the cloth," the emperor thought, but he felt slightly uncomfortable when he remembered that those who were unfit for their positions wouldn't be able to see the fabric. It couldn't have been that he doubted himself, yet he thought he'd rather send someone else to see how things were going. The whole town knew about the cloth's peculiar power, and all were impatient to find out how stupid their neighbours were. "I'll send my honest ministers to the weavers, the oldest, most honest one," the emperor decided. "He'll be the best one to tell me how the material looks. He's a sensible man, and no one does his duty better than him." So the honest old minister went into the room where the two swindlers sat working away at their empty looms. "Heaven help me," he thought, as his eyes flew wide open. "I can't see anything at all." But of course he didn't say anything. Both the swindlers begged him to be so kind as to come near to approve the excellent pattern and the beautiful colours. They pointed to the empty looms, and the poor old minister stared as hard as he dared. He couldn't see anything, because there was nothing to see. "Heaven have mercy," he thought. "Can it be I'm a fool? Not a soul must know. Am I unfit to be the minister? It would never do to let on that I can't see the cloth." "Don't hesitate to tell us what you think of it," said one of the weavers. Oh, it's beautiful. Yes, it is. It's enchanting." The old minister peered through his spectacles. "Such pattern! What colours! I'll be sure to tell the emperor how delighted I am with it." "We're pleased to hear that," said the swindlers, and they proceeded to name all the colours and explain the intricate pattern. The old minister paid the closest attention so that he could tell everything to the emperor, and so he did. The swindlers at once asked for more money, more silk and more gold thread to get on with the weaving. But it all went into their pockets. Not a thread went into the looms, though they worked hard at their weaving, as hard as ever. The emperor presently sent another trustworthy official to see how the work was progressing, and he wanted to know how soon it would be ready. The same thing happened to him. He looked and he looked, but there was nothing to see in the looms. He couldn't see anything. "Isn't it a beautiful piece of goods?" the swindlers asked him, as they displayed and described their imaginary pattern. I know I'm not stupid," the man thought, "so it must be that I'm unworthy of my good office. That's strange. I mustn't let anyone find out, though. No one must find this out. So he praised the material he didn't see. He declared he was delighted with the beautiful colours and the exquisite pattern. He told the emperor that it had him spellbound. All the town was talking about this splendid cloth, and the emperor wanted to see it for himself finally while it was still in the looms. Attended by a band of chosen men, among who were his true trusted officials, the ones who had been the weavers, he set out to see the two swindlers, and he found them weaving with might and main, but without a thread in the looms. "Magnificent," said the two officials, already duped. "Just look, your majesty, what colours, what design!" And they pointed to the empty looms, each supposing that the others could see the cloth. "What's this?" thought the emperor. I can't see anything. This is terrible. Am I a fool? Am I unfit to be the emperor? What a thing to happen to me of all people! Oh, yes, it's very pretty," he said. "It has my highest approval." And he nodded in appreciation at the empty loom. Nothing could make him say that he couldn't see anything. They all stared and stared. One saw no more than the other, but they all joined the emperor in exclaiming, "Oh, it's so pretty!" And they advised him to wear the clothes made of this wonderful cloth, especially for the great procession that he was soon to lead. "Magnificent, excellent, unsurpassed," were bandied from mouth to mouth, and everyone did his best to seem pleased and excited. The emperor gave each of the swindlers a cross to wear in his buttonhole, and the title of Sir Weaver. Before the procession, the swindlers sat up all night and burned more than 6 candles to show how busy they were. Finishing the emperor's new clothes, they pretended to take the cloth off the loom. They made cuts in the air with huge scissors, and they said, "Now the emperor's new clothes are ready for him." Then the emperor himself came in with his noblest noblemen, and the swindlers each raised an arm as if they were holding something. They said, "These are the trousers, and here's the coat, and here's the mantle," naming each garment. All of them are as light as a spider's web. One would almost think that he had nothing on, but that's what makes them so fine. "Exactly," all the noblemen agreed, although they could see nothing, for there was nothing to see. "If your Imperial Majesty will consent to take your clothes off," said the swindlers, "we'll help you on with your new clothes right here in front of this long mirror." The emperor undressed, and the swindlers pretended to put his new clothes on him, one garment after another. They took him around the waist, and they seemed to be fastening on something, and that was his train, as the emperor turned around and around before the looking-glass. "How well your Majesty's new clothes look! Aren't they becoming?" he heard on all sides. "That pattern, so perfect, those colours, so suitable. It's a magnificent outfit." Then the Minister of Public Processions announced, "Your Majesty's canopy is waiting outside." "Well, I'm supposed to be ready," the emperor said, and he turned around again for one last look in the mirror. "It's a remarkable fit, isn't it?" He seemed to regard his costume with the greatest interest. The noblemen who were to carry his train stooped down low and reached for the floor as they were picking up his mantle, and then they prepared to lift and hold it high. They didn't dare admit that they had nothing to hold. So off went the emperor in the procession under his splendid, beautiful canopy. Everyone in the streets and everyone looking out of their windows from up high on posts all over the town said, "Oh, how fine are the emperor's new clothes! Don't they fit him to perfection? And look at his long train!" Nobody would confess that they couldn't see anything, for that would prove him either unfit for their position or a fool. No costume the emperor had ever worn before was such a complete success. But he hasn't got anything on," a little child said. Did you ever hear such innocent talk? Said his father, and one person whispered to another one what the child had said. He hasn't got anything on. He hasn't got anything on. A child says he hasn't got anything on. He hasn't got anything on. He hasn't got anything on. But he hasn't got anything on, the whole town cried out at last. The emperor shivered, for he suspected that they were right, but he thought, this procession has got to go on, so he walked more proudly than ever, as his noblemen held high the train that wasn't there at all. And that's the end of the story. Just a footnote, if you're an Aries, you might be thinking I'm saying that you're the emperor in this story, because Aries are represented by the emperor, of course. But if you're an Aries, I see you as the child in this story. You're prepared to say what other people won't say. And people might initially be upset with what you're saying, but after a while I think you'll probably find that a lot of people might end up following you. And you might also find that a lot of people go against you, or they might be angry, or even they might even ignore you, like the emperor ignored all the people. But you're always in your truth, like an innocent child. And if you're not Aries, I hope you enjoyed the story anyway. Thank you for listening to this story, and good night.